horror film.
I mean, Founded. That shit also scared the shit out of me when I was young.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, how about you, Morgan? What's your favorite scary movie?
I also typically avoid scary movies, but mine is the other end of the spectrum. It's because I'm such a wimp. And
Mm-hmm.
I like to attribute that to just having such an overactive imagination that I'll watch a scary movie and then go to bed that night, and every dark shadow my mind is just racing to populate it with the most horrible, terrifying thing, which, I could make some pretty scary movies, I think, just because of the shit my mind can conjure up. But at the same time, I don't
Mm-hmm.
like flipping that switch because it really gets to me. So the quote unquote scary movies that I really enjoy are the ones that aren't legitimately scary. Like horror comedy, The Cabin in the Woods with like
Mm-hmm.
Chris Hemsworth. I
That's a good movie.
I love that. Cuz I can laugh through the dread. But yeah, that's not my anything to do with like supernatural demons, spirits. It gets to me, man. I lived a lot of my youth in a haunted house. That shit fucks me up.
Well, again, we are talking about how to create a horror atmosphere for your players and to frighten them to keep them on the edge of their seats. Uh, it sounds like I'm the only horror movie aficionado here.
I think you might be.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Well, one of my favorite directors now is Ari Aster, who directed Hereditary,
Mm-hmm.
Midsummer.
God, so good.
I like
I
Lars
love
von.
Midsummer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
That's a horror movie, Joe.
I love Midsummer.
I loved it too. See,
I
that's
just
more
don't.
psychological.
Yeah, it's more of
Yeah,
a
it's
psychological
horrifying. Yeah.
thriller. I don't. Well, do I have Midsummer? I need to look that up now.
Did you see Hereditary?
No, I didn't see Hereditary.
Holy crap! You should watch Hereditary if you like Midsummer.
Let me-
It's on the list for this month.
It is absolutely a horror movie. Um, so what
But
do you?
I left Midsummer just going, good for her.
I do have Midsummer,
Really?
but it's listed as a thriller and not a horror
Hmm.
I would.
for
uh,
Apple iTunes. Now, I mean, I think that would be a different
Uh,
thing about the classification.
Anything we talk about, of course, is in spoilers territory. But they hollow out a bear and stuff like that. How is that a horror? You know? I mean, yeah, and then burn him alive. Yeah.
It is horrific. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Right.
It's an amazing movie. I love that director. I like Lars von Trier, Gaspar Noé, and slasher movies too. You know, if I'm feeling nostalgic for the '80s. Uh,
Yeah.
Last year, well, I suppose it ended in March of this year. I DM'd The Curse of Strahd, and we ran it from beginning to end with 4, sometimes 5 players. So I learned a couple of things about how to make players really feel the atmosphere. You know what I'm saying? Um, Joe, have you ever run a scary campaign?
Uh, I have had to run. I don't think I've run a scary campaign. I've run a module that lasted a couple sessions, that had horror elements to it. But I don't have that much experience with it. Not to the point of like how long it took you to run Curse of Strahd, but I've dabbled a bit.
Well, I have a short list of things that I think DMs should try to do if they really want their characters to, feel afraid. Number one would be things that, well, they're all things that you get from watching horror movies. Like, what scares you? You know what I'm saying? And these movies that we enjoy that make us feel scared, the first thing would be that you need to care about your character
Mm.
as a player, right? If you don't care about your character, then why would you care what happens to him, right?
Right.
And it's hard to make a player care about his character. You know, you get those guys you get those people that just, don't really care about what's happening or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If you can't get them to care about a character, then you can get them to care about an NPC, and have terrible things happen to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Curse of Strahd, there's a ton of NPCs that you can have terrible things happen to. One of which is Esmeralda, which is going to be changed a little bit, I believe, in Curse of Strahd Revamped, which is supposed to be coming out this month, I think, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Esmeralda is a former... Oh, what are they called? The Vistani, yes. She's a former Vistani turned vampire hunter. And she is the vampire hunter's assistant, something like that. And she has a prosthetic leg, which I believe in the original Curse of Strahd, she tries to hide the prosthetic leg, whereas in Revamp, she doesn't. Minor change, but it does mean a lot to some people.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
But when I ran Curse of Strahd, I didn't read that one line that said she had a prosthetic leg. So, I don't know, I just missed it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that wasn't in my game when I ran it at home. But there is a location in Curse of Strahd where they have a it's called the Abbey. And of course religious stuff is super scary too, right?
Yeah.
But the Abbey has a crazy abbot who is a celestial that came to Barovia and went crazy because of his being close to Strahd or something like that. And he starts creating mongrel folk, which is where you take people and you make dogs and bats and whatever out of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're fusing the DNA together or something or other. And he thinks he's making them better. And one of the coolest sessions we had where it was the party had met Esmeralda and they liked her a lot, and she went off on her own. They wanted to do something and she didn't want to, so she went off on her own, right? Well, while the party wasn't looking, she got abducted by the abbot. And he was going to make her better, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they interrupted him in the middle of changing her. So they come and they find her on an operation table, and most of her arms and legs have been replaced with spider legs.
I remember this story. Yeah. Your players still talk about this.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And he hadn't finished. Like, it was like real loose stitches, and she was still bleeding and unconscious, right? And we had this whole session where our cleric had to he kept having to roll survival rolls or medicine checks or something like that, where they reattached her actual arms and legs. And yeah, they still talk about that because it was fucking horrific, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can't make the player care about his own character or her own character, then give him an NPC to care about, right?
That's right. I do have one question. Was this considering the time frame, was this a game that you ran online, or did you run this game in person?
This one was actually all in person. We finished it in February.
Gotcha.
Oh, right before, yeah.
Right before, yeah. And we had 4 players that showed up every week in person. Yeah.
I think an important distinction that might be helpful for this time period is to also talk about things that you can do to help create the setting for in person, and also for creating the setting by playing online, which is how we're all playing these days.
That's a good point. Like, if you're online, you're not in the same room.
Right.
I don't know. What do you
Yeah,
think?
man, I wish I could be running Icewind Dale in person right now. There's so many touches that I would be throwing on it. I mean, it's an Arctic setting, so I would probably crank my AC down a little bit, just make people a little uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
keep all the lights low. And a big part of what I'm struggling with finding a balance for online is music and ambient sound. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've run plenty of in-person games where James, I know I have playlists for all my characters, but I also have playlists for different moods for tabletop. So I have a
Mm-hmm.
combat playlist, but I also have ambient dungeon. I have ambient ominous. I have haunted forest. I've got all sorts of different moods that you can set just through the auditory function. And if you
Mm-hmm.
watch a good horror movie, that's so much of the subliminal cue is the music shifts or the level changes in the sound effects in a scene. Even when you don't notice them consciously, it prepares your subconscious to be terrified. It's like when you know a jump scare is coming, a lot of times it's got to do with the music.
Mm-hmm.
So finding a way to
That's
integrate that
true.
online is definitely on my list.
Music's a good way. Music's a good way to do that because most everybody has a headset on, right? And they can't get away from it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good point.
I don't know, Joe. What do you think? Do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, so I think it depends on uh, what program you're using to communicate with your players with. I know that there are bots that you can that play playlists in Discord, and so
Mm.
a lot of the games that um, I'm a part of, whether I'm running or being a PC for, a lot use Discord and use that functionality to have a bot play a preset playlist for you.
Okay, I'm gonna look into that.
I want to say that Roll20 also
Mhm.
offers the ability to play music as well. I'm not as well versed at that, but I know that that offers uh, functionality as well. Although I will say that um, I, even though it does offer that functionality, I would prefer using Discord because that's where the communication is happening for the games that I'm playing in, and it's a lot easier to to work
Mm.
with. I guess that's also because I know that system a little bit already. So
Right.
but I
So,
think having that music is like, especially playing remote, is super important for creating that tension, that setting
Mhm.
that you want.
That's a good word too, tension. Like, and that's something that
mm,
we've only run one session of Icewind Dale, but the slow build and the slow burn of it is definitely something that I want to pay some attention to laying the foundation for. And I can't give away too much because James is playing in that game. But I'm
eh,
trying to just start very, very slow with planting the occasional seed of paranoia here and there. Um, but that's something that's definitely going to ramp up because this won't give too much away, but the earlier stages of it, you're still in civilization, you're moving between these different settlements. But later on, when you start pushing out into the open, icy vastness, that's when the mind games would really start. Like you said, it's sort of got a loose touch of the thing inspiring it. So I went back and watched. I had never seen that movie, so I went back and watched the original one from the '80s, and then
mm.
the revamp, which got to give credit where it's due. The final scene from the revamp is the opening scene of the original, which is just incredible.
Kurt Russell's
But
hair is amazing in that movie.
yes, it is. Oh my gosh, that mane, yeah. But what a good
Amazing.
setting for just pure fear is
Yeah,
just that
Antarctica. Yeah.
open void.
Hmm.
Have you read at the Mountains of Madness
I have
by any
not.
chance?
Mm-mm.
Maybe you should. It's written by H.P. Lovecraft.
Okay.
It was released as I believe it. I may be wrong with this, but I believe it was released as a serial. One of those things back the turn of the century, the previous century. when they would try to trick people in the newspaper, right?
Right.
So I believe it was released as a serial and as an actual, like, document about, something that happened. And it's about a research team who goes into Antarctica. And I believe at the time, the only one who had been through Antarctica was Admiral Byrd. So this was all new to anybody, right? So the premise of the story is this research team goes to Antarctica, and he goes into detail about the supplies they have. They have a couple of airplanes. They have, this and that. And they discover a city in the middle of Antarctica. Well, they discover the mountains first, right? There's these impossibly high mountains in Antarctica. And to get over them, they have to take one of the airplanes, and it's just 2 guys on board. There's no supplies. There's not just to be able to get high enough to get over them, right? And once they get over it, they discover an ancient city. And the story is about what they find inside that city, and it is truly terrifying. It really is.
I might have to read that.
It's not a novel; it's a novella.
Okay.
And it I don't know. It's a long afternoon of a read.
Okay.
And
I can do that.
it is really it taps into those things about the origin of ourselves. I could see how it really scared religious people. It's really terrifying. It really is.
Okay.
So I read that they'd based or had Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostbane was loosely inspired by that. That's what made me really interested. Apparently, Guillermo del Toro is supposed to be making a movie out of it.
Oh, wow, that's going to be incredible. I love him.
I remember years ago he was going to, and then the project got shelved because of some other movie that was coming out that had kind of a close plot line to it, and they were like, meh, right? But now apparently it's back on. I'm really looking forward to that if they ever make that one.
Awesome.
So, a couple interesting notes. Lovecraft received $315 for that serialized story.
Okay, so it was
which is the most he's ever received for a story. That's a little bit less than $6,000 in today's money.
Oh wow!
Wow.
He was really mad about how it was edited. A lot of changes and passages were omitted, and they didn't release a fully restored text until it was republished in 1985.
Which is long before I read it, so I suppose I read the fully restored text.
So just a couple of trivia notes for you.
I'll have to make sure I get the full version.
And it is really scary. I really enjoy that novel or novella. I highly recommend you read it, Morgan. I think you would enjoy it. I think it would help you with your Icewind Dale campaign if it was in fact inspired by that. We got a question in the comments.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. How do you deal with a player or character who might be tone deaf to the moment, throwing it off? So let's say you're trying to weave that really serious, super serial moment, right? And you got that player who's just, not with it whatsoever. What do you do? What do you think, Joe?
I'll defer on this one.
See, it's interesting that comes up because that's definitely something that I'm keeping an eye on after our first Icewind Dale session, because there's definitely a little happy-go-lucky in our group, but with an ongoing homebrew campaign that I've run in the past, this was also a moment. It wasn't necessarily the tone of horror that was getting broken, but there was definitely a little bit of tone deafness there. And I watched it for a couple of sessions, tried to end the game, use at one point an NPC to sort of coach it in the right direction, shifted the vocabulary to try and really emphasize the impression that I was trying to leave on the characters. And it helped a little bit, but still didn't quite get to the point that I wanted to. So I actually pulled the player aside later after one of like the maybe the third or fourth session, since this had sort of kind of come to the forefront of my attention. And I was like, hey, I get it. And this is also a player. It depends on the player, I'll say as well. But this was a player who definitely didn't have the same degree of investment and immersion as some of the other players at the table. They were more, I'm just waiting for the next combat, and less invested in the role play and the narrative side of things. And I just pulled them aside. I was like, I totally get it. Everyone's got a different play style that they enjoy. But these, what you just see as downtime moments where it's just story and for story's sake, that may not be what really excites you the most about a game, but there are players at the table that really love that and want to stay fully immersed in those moments and really get to appreciate the tone of it. And he was like, oh yeah, I'd never really thought about it that way. I'll definitely sort of back off with like having to wisecrack every second that I see an opportunity. And he did. Like he took that and grew from it a little bit. And it was somber moments. That's where he was always just wisecracking. And we had a session a moment the very next session where a bit of another character's backstory was revealed to the party for the first time. It's kind of a dark element, and it really explained how that character had shaped who they were at the moment. And there was a pause, a silence at the table as the characters sort of took in the information, which is where he normally would have like had to make some quip or offhand remark just to fill it, but the silence just lingered and it just hung there. And that alone was so heavy and almost tactile in the moment that it really just drove home the revelation that had just been had. And that just plays back to preserving the tone. So sometimes if you have to meta it, if you have to pull a player aside after a session, it can be worth it, especially when you have receptive players that are willing to take in everyone's perspectives and what everyone is trying to get out of a game, because it's going to be different for every person. That's just part of what D&D is.
That's true. And I know what you're talking about as far as the first session goes, but I will say, when we started Curse of Strahd, Alex's character was a lot like that one character in our first episode. A lot like that. And as the game progressed, that character became broken down. And it was way more horrifying than it would have been if he was a horror character at the beginning. You know what I'm saying? If you take that character that's boisterous, flamboyant, whatever, and you run him through a ringer, it can mean a lot more than taking a character that was a horror movie character already. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And I have a feeling that's where our game's gonna go. Our Wednesday game. I don't know. I just have a feeling.
Who knows?
Yeah.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be meaningful. I think.
Very excited to see what that has in store. See how y'all respond to a lot of what's coming.
I mean, I know how I'll respond, but that's part of the great. That's the great thing about D&D, right? You don't know how people are gonna respond. It's not just you playing a video game or watching a horror movie. It's you got 6 other people responding how they or how they think their characters would respond, right?
And you know that's. I mentioned it before the first session of Icewind Dale. I will every subsequent session, but that's an important part of going for a horror theme or tone in general. Is you always want to make sure everyone knows what they're in for. You don't want to go for like the shock and trauma porn element of it if your players don't know that it's a possibility. I'm all for having your players be uncomfortable, putting those characters in difficult positions. But at the end of the day, it's a game that everyone's getting together to enjoy. And I don't want to ever make anyone regret putting themselves at my table. So if anyone's watching and has something like this that you're planning, it's worth having the conversation with your players before the game even starts. James, you know that we did this in our session 0 with Icewind. Make sure it's an informed decision that everyone's making to go into this kind of setting.
Morgan, I've seen movies that you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It is amazing what people will enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
But you go to a horror movie expecting to see a horror movie.
Yeah, and there are horror movies, and then there are horror movies. You know,
Right.
There are movies out there that like nobody should ever watch, but they were made anyway because people enjoy this. You never know what people are going to enjoy, whether they're sitting at home watching a movie or whether they're in your game. I think part of horror is going to be pushing boundaries, and everybody might know, of course, that they're in a horror D&D game, but why it is not scary if you're not pushing their boundaries a little, right? Yeah, just a little. You know, push them way off into something weird, right? But you don't want to get weird on them. But
it's gonna get weird. It's gonna get weird.
Ooh. So what are you doing on Wednesdays, Joe? Are you gonna join us or what?
Sure.
I may have to fucking start running another day of the week because at this point there are 4 people that have asked to join this game, and Joe would make 5. Shit, I got 2 full parties.
That's some hot demand.
Morgan's gonna go weird, Joe. You ready for that?
Come on. Come on.
I'm ready for that.
The Arctic tundra, no one can hear you scream.
Uh-huh. Was it back into space? No one can hear you scream. Yeah.
I will say that I'm sad for playing in this time where you can't have everyone around a table and like set the lighting, like either like playing by candlelight or just like turn off all the lights and just have something dim, or even like my lights here in my place are LEDs and I can change them to any color pretty much. So like, I could dim everything or turn everything off and then like dim one light to red, to create a different atmosphere. And I'm sad that we aren't able to add that element to games now, which I think makes it really important for coming across with a really good picture for theater of the mind. That I think helps to make up for it. There's a lot of, like, if you're running a pre-written campaign, there's a lot of flavor text. I think for a GM, make sure to like delve deeper into it and come up with much more much more precise descriptions about the area that the PCs are entering into, and really go after all the senses. Like, what do they smell?
Yes.
What is is there like a sense of an ease in the air or something, like just figure out ways to make the hairs stand up on end.
It's funny you mentioned spell specifically, because I just for the first time was able to get into the restock of cantrip candles. I don't know if y'all are familiar with what he does, but they are tabletop atmosphere themed scented candles. So for example, the ones I ordered, one is called brine water, so it's like driftwood, salt, and sea air. And then one is called Thieves Den, which is like whiskey, leather, and incense.
That's what my house smells like.
Oh yeah? Is that a Thieves Den? I can't wait to be able to play in person again, exactly for what you said, Joe, to get those 5 senses involved. And online, you have to describe it to sort of convey that. But I think there's something to be said for striking the perfect balance between providing a lot of information to really flesh out a scene, but leaving just enough mystique so that the players' imaginations fill the blanks with what they dread most. Because I, as a DM, no matter how well I know these people, I don't know the deep, dark secrets of the recesses of their mind. But if I can put them on edge enough, their mind will fill in the gaps for me with things that I could never really reach in and grab to disturb them the way their own mind can. That's what a good horror movie does too.
That's where nightmares come from.
Exactly.
I remember when I ran Curse of Strahd, I bought a little fog machine.
Ooh.
And there's different ways that you can get into Curse of Strahd, for your first session, where how they get into Barovia, right? And one of them was they're tricked in by werewolves, which is the one I went with, right? So, but when they entered the mists of Barovia chasing this werewolf, I clicked the fog machine on. It was like, right?
Nice.
And everybody laughed because it was funny when the fog machine went off, right? And so I made a little bit of a joke of it. But after that, the fog would like linger in the air, and I had candles on the table. I don't have overhead lights on. I had candles on the table, kind of set the atmosphere. That really helped. It's hard to do that online. I don't know. I guess you're kind of depending on your players to set their own atmosphere in that case, and their own rooms or wherever they're playing from.
I need to pull from your bag of tricks with that virtual tabletop enhancement suite, because that one map that you used for us in the Friday night game that had the animated spiders, that made my skin crawl.
Using different kinds of maps, animated maps is fun. I was gonna use another one on Friday, but it kind of got fucked up this last Friday.
Oops.
The whole thing is a little iffy as far as getting the technology to work. But when you get it to work, it could be pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, the payoff can be big.
Yeah. You can find. I find those on Roll20, the subreddit for Roll20.
Okay.
Or YouTube. There's a way to get. You can search animated battle map on YouTube, and they're on YouTube, right? And there's a way to use VLC multimedia player to put those on Roll20. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So, and that's what I was gonna do on Friday, but I didn't realize if I closed it out and brought it back, the Roll20 back up, that it would fuck it up. So I used a different map.
Oh, you don't worry. You still managed to terrify us with whatever the fuck that thing was just fine.
I bet Joe knows what it is.
I wasn't there for it, so
well, I bet you know what it is. You're an old school D&D guy, right?
Yeah.
I still can't pronounce it. YGORL.
Igorl.
The Lord of Entropy.
The Lord of Entropy, Joe. Are you?
I'm not familiar with this.
Hashtag watch Entropy on Sundays.
The Lord of Entropy.
Thanks for that moment. Thank you.
Yeah, you should definitely. Why aren't you watching Entropy, Joe? On Sunday, we're gonna be on tomorrow. Episode 7, I believe, of Entropy.
Are we finally busting out of this school? I'm ready to kill stuff.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe.
Ooh, okay.
Maybe. You should be watching this, Joe. I'm
Yeah.
a little disappointed that you're not.
I'll get on it.
I'm a little hurt. I'm a little offended.
Are you? I'll make it up to you.
You're looking up?
I am looking up
Igorl.
the Lord of Entropy.
Igorl. YGORL.
Yeah.
Yuck. Igorl.
He has a pumpkin-looking head.
It depends on what you look at. There's a lot of different pictures. I used a picture from like 1975 or something for my token.
Listen, just standing next to him dealt 51 points of damage to most of our party in one round. That's scary, okay?
This was the thing that was had an aura of necrotic damage around it.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
And that's another way that you can terrify your players is to hurt them.
Yeah. That's a very effective way.
If you can't make them feel the fear just from atmosphere, fucking hurt them. That'll do it too.
Ooh. Ooh.
Hmm. I know Joe knows all about that, don't you, Joe?
I mean, you gotta knock those PCs down a bit.
Knocking down a peg.
You gotta put the fear of death for their characters.
That's a good
Well,
point.
that's definitely there.
If they know they're not gonna die, then what's there to be scared of, right?
That's right.
Yeah, you have to. Even if as a DM you know they're not gonna die, they need to think they might die.
Right. They need to have skin in the game.
Yeah.
James, do you want to tell Joe what showed up at the end of our session last night?
I don't remember. I was,
Oh, sure. Just, Joe, what's one of the biggest, scariest D&D monsters in 5e that you can think of?
Well, there's one that I know that I would love to fight.
And what would that be?
It would be a Tarask.
Well, you might just be in luck, my friend.
That I need to send out. There's an old school article, and this, I know this is way off topic, but it lists what is the lowest level character that you could use to defeat a Tarask.
What was their answer?
I want to say it was like,
I hope it was less than 17.
it was less than 10.
Nope, shit. So you're gonna be fine. I don't know what you're worried about.
But yeah, there's a lot of planning that would have to go into how to beat a Tarask at such low levels.
We're getting no planning. We stepped through a portal and there it was.
You got a week to think about it.
Yeah, I'll send this out to the group. It's a funny article, but I digress.
And there's only one. There's one of them, so you're fine. You'll be fine. I don't know what you're worried about.
As long as we're not running into a Tarask swarm, that would.
No, it's just one of them.
Okay, cool. Can you imagine?
Unless it goes down too easy, and then oh no, there's no one behind you.
A Tarask swarm is horrifying.
Yeah, that's horrifying. You want to scare your players? Bring in a Tarask swarm. Yeah.
Well, what was it that you hit us with a swarm of? Assassin bugs? Assassin flies?
Yeah, it was, it wasn't really a swarm. It was just a lot of them.
But body horror. The body horror of that was...
Well, Friday night, you had to go up against slots as well, and they also have their own little body horror type thing. But really similar to the assassin bug, actually. They hit you, and if you fail that Constitution save, which is pretty low, honestly, at your level. But, if anybody failed that Constitution save... And, I think a couple of people did fail that, didn't they? And they were like, oh, no, I got an 11. What does that mean? I was like, we'll see, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I don't remember who it was, though.
I think Alden did, and one other player. And they're not watching.
Well, bats can, just turn into water. If he turns into water, won't the egg just,
It wasn't bad. I don't remember who it was. There were 2 people who failed it. And there's a 3-month gestation period. It's 3 months.
So what you're saying is I can save the spell slots to fight the Tarask and then just do restoration on them later.
Well, they don't know they've been impregnated with slot eggs. So a slot, it hits you with an egg, and it gestates for 3 months, and then it bursts out of you, kind of like the alien, and So that, and back on topic, that's another way to scare your players is with body horror, a la Alien, or something like that, right? Yeah, so they have 3 months before a slot bursts out of them. 3 months in game time. Which we'll probably end the game before that, and I won't say anything.
Yeah, I mean, we're at level 17.
But I'll know.
You ride off into the sunset and get disemboweled by a slot who is being birthed out of your...
Disgusting.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is kind of awesome.
I do like to if there's situations that I know are kind of iconic, that there's a film or something out there, I'll try to look up, like, get a YouTube clip or something to send to players to like help immerse them and guide the theater of the mind into, like, you know, letting their imagination jump off that point, right? So I think that's
Mhm.
another way to just bring your players into the fold, especially being remote from each other. So
Oh
Yeah,
yeah, I mentioned
absolutely.
to James that I'm going to be doing some special effects makeup at different moments for the
ooh,
Icewind campaign. Maybe a
nice.
little frostbite, maybe a little inhuman prosthetics. We'll see. We'll see.
That's
Ooh.
awesome.
Jay
Visual aids
Parker.
are great. And I'm the prop person in person games. If a player's getting like a secret letter, you know I've got the tea out. I am hand staining paper.
Ooh,
I've got the wax seals. Like I'm all about like
wow.
that physical interaction, that tactile.
Yeah,
I love that shit.
that's
Love it.
awesome.
I used to do stuff like that till March. But
Where
once
are we
March,
on? Like March 437?
yeah, something like that. March has been going on forever, man.
Though I gotta say, so far, October is that bitch in the group that does the whole project. I mean, she delivering so
I
far, if
love
you know what I'm
October.
saying.
October has always been my favorite month.
Mhm.
Of any year I've been alive, October has always been my favorite month. I think I have the opposite of seasonal affective disorder.
Mhm.
Or I have it the opposite way that most people do. Most people are really happy in the summer, and then it starts to get cold, and they get sad. I'm the other way around, right? So
Oh yeah.
uh, once
Oh,
those
me and Erica
leaves,
have talked about
once
this.
those leaves come out of the trees, and you get that little chill in the air, I just get happy as hell. So I've always been glad for October, and this year doubly so.
What is it about the cold though that just inspires ominous feeling? Because I'm the same way. I love fall, I love winter, but have definitely been moments where I've been outside and there's just been a chill in the air, and it just like it makes the hair on the back of your neck stand
Well,
up a little bit.
lots of people have frozen to death. No one has ever beached to death. You know what I mean? Like just sat on the beach and died because it was because it was too balmy. You know what I mean? Like that hasn't happened before, but lots of people are frozen to death. So I think it's baked into our DNA
Like a
to be
survival instinct.
yeah to be scared of the cold.
Yeah.
Um, you know when we were trying to come up with a good name for the show, Joe, which we landed on frigophobia or frigophobia or something.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just the best one we could come up with. I still feel like it was out there somewhere. But I like frigophobia. I think it's a good name. It's the fear of freezing to death. Um, but I read a lot of articles about what happens when you freeze to death. Because I was looking for that perfect name for the show, right? And the most interesting one, or the most interesting symptom of freezing to death that I came up with is called paradoxical undressing. Have you ever heard of that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so apparently what happens as you freeze to death, anybody who's going to watch frigophobia, or maybe it's frigophobia, I don't know. I like frigophobia. It's got like a hard G in there, you know?
Yeah.
If you're going to watch frigophobia, think about this. Okay, so you freeze to death, right? As your body temperature drops, your brain starts shutting off energy to non-essential functions, right?
Yep.
One of which is your cognitive function. Because you don't really need it to survive, right? So it starts shutting off those things that you don't need and shunting that energy to keep you warm. So as you freeze to death, you enter a certain kind of dementia, is what it is. Like you go mad, you become an animal, basically. Then the last thing your brain does, it uses that last bit of energy that it has to induce capillary action, which opens the blood vessels on the outside of your skin, and it makes you feel really warm, right? Which they think that makes you feel like unreasonably hot all of a sudden, right? And if you feel unreasonably hot all of a sudden, and your brain isn't there, You're basically an opossum at this point, right? Cognitively, people start taking their clothes off. So apparently they found a whole bunch of people frozen to death that were naked, and they had to figure out why. If that isn't scary, I don't know what will. Paradoxical undressing, Joe. I know you're looking it up right now.
Well, I'm actually the Morgan made a great point about like why is it that we feel fear or tend to feel like associate cold with fear, and it's kind of going along with what you're saying is when we have a stress response in our bodies to and like get anxiety, our bodies are actually shutting down blood flow to the non-essentials like your hands and feet and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And you know it's conserving that heat for your core. So and that's why, and that also plays into why you get chills and goosebumps and everything, is because you are experiencing a stress that is causing you to conserve your heat for your more vital areas, not just in your thought, but also in your physiological process.
And there is a real danger of freezing to death. Even in the United States, it happens to people every year, right? I mean, the United States has some pretty wacky weather and climate and stuff, but in certain areas, but people freeze to death every year. But yeah, nobody ever. Oh my God, it's so balmy, and they just died, right? It's that cold terror. That's why the chill runs up your spine. That's why why cold is associated with terror to begin with.
Yeah.
I lived in South Dakota for a few years, and everybody.
I'm sorry.
I loved it there, but everybody kept a winter emergency kit in their cars. I had a bag of kitty litter, in case your car got stuck. You can sprinkle the kitty litter on the snow and get out, right?
Mm-hmm.
A coffee can and a candle, which is like a heater. You'd light the candle and you put the can over it, or you put the candle inside the can, and it would warm the whole car up. In case you broke down on the side of the road, you could just die. In a few hours, you run out of gas, you break down on the side of the road, and a couple hours later you're dead. Because that's how cold it was, right? So I think that's why we associate cold with fear.
Yeah.
It's because there's a real danger of freezing to death. Even I don't know, maybe even in Georgia. I mean, we've had nights where it gets below.
Mm-hmm.
We've had single digit nights here. That's cold enough to die.
Mm-hmm.
The human body just doesn't handle cold as well as it does the warmth.
Mm-hmm.
Although with global warming, we'll see. I
Yep.
guess, raise that a few degrees, and who knows.
You got the dehydration. I mean, it'll take a lot longer.
People do die of dehydration, that's true.
But, yeah.
I hope you got a lot of good ideas, Morgan.
Oh yeah, this has definitely got the wheels turning. And I've got to pick up at the Mountains of Madness. That sounds like it's
great.
I did want to plug a friend of mine, Griffin, who is in our Wednesday night game, has given me access to this. It's called Grim Hollow.
Uh-huh.
Well, it is a horror campaign from, let me make sure to give the proper credits here,
I think I've heard of that.
Ghostfire Gaming.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some really cool, unique mechanics in here that I might be pulling into our game. So I don't want to say too much about them. But all of this is fundamental terror. Like the setting itself is designed to be not just dangerous, but unsettling. And they've got some really cool ideas in here. Again, I don't want to give any specifics because I want you to have the shock value, James. But just research. If you want to really get some good tips, I mean, the advent of the internet is amazing in that there's access to so much. And, they say there's always someone out there doing it better than you. Well, put that to your advantage. Figure out what they're doing and just make it your own.
That would be my advice. If you're gonna run a horror campaign, you want your players to be really scared, go watch a shitload of horror movies. That's what I would do.
Especially in the theme of what you're trying to
Yeah.
write.
Mhm.
Find out what scares you, and
Mhm.
unleash that on your players.
And why, and use the why to build something.
Think about why.
unique.
Yeah. Watch those horror movies, and when something really scares you, think about why did that scare me.
Speaking of, I think it's about time we watch our scary movie for tonight.
Oh yeah, what are you watching?
The Forest, starring Natalie Dormer, which is about a real place in Japan, which is colloquially called Suicide Forest.
Yeah.
So I know a little bit about it already, but I'm very interested to see how they spin it for the purposes of a horror movie. But being surrounded by death in and of itself is dread-inducing. So,
Joe, have you ever seen The Thing?
It's been a minute, but yes.
That's your homework. I want you to watch The Thing.
Again?
Yes.
Watch the prequel. It's not as good, but
if it's been a minute, then that means like 10 years at least.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You should watch it again with your own, modern, this is Joe now, not Joe then, right?
I'll have to go. I'll go buy it on.
Or what?
iTunes.
You know what? Just watch some YouTube videos about it.
Okay.
I think it's free to stream on Prime right now. Yeah, Prime.
There you go. Reviews and criticisms and stuff about it, and and then this is the important part, Joe. Then you have to watch us on Wednesday in Morgan's game.
Yeah.
Frigophobia, where we play through Rhyme with the Frost Maiden.
Let me know if I'm terrifying them enough.
We'll do.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time on Goblin Talk. We'll come up with some kind of topic between now and then. It is October, which means a spooky season. So we will have spooky topics between now and November. Once November hits, it's all over. So we're gonna
it might be.
The end of civilization is coming before November, so we're gonna get all our spooky out before then. Yeah. So join us in a week or so, or a few days, or whenever we do it. We tend to jam this in whenever we can. So thank you for coming, Morgan. I know you had things to do. Your makeup looks beautiful. You look beautiful. I know you had things to do other than this. Thank you for coming. Joe,
anytime.
You look nice too, I guess.
Gorgeous.
You could try a little harder with the makeup, Joe. Seriously.
Look, I'm working on my mountain man beard.
Morgan's making you look like an idiot right now. So try a little harder.
Look, I do that perfectly fine on my own. I don't need help from anyone.
And we will see you soon for the next episode of Goblin Talk. Bye, everybody.
Later.
Bye.